Why would a man who is $10 million in debt take a job where he doesn't get paid? Weird, right? We now know that's exactly what the now jailed Paul Manafort did when he took a job running Donald Trump's campaign back in 2016. It appears that Manafort saw the job as a financial opportunity despite the lack of salary. Just a short time after he was first hired by Trump, Manafort sent an email asking, quote, "How do we use to get whole?" Meaning, how do we use my new job to get whole? How do we use to get whole? Manafort sent that email to a guy you may remember named Konstantin Kilimnik, who had worked for Manafort in Ukraine. He has since been indicted by Robert Mueller and fled to Russia. And the person they were apparently trying to get whole with was this guy, who you also may know, Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, one of Russia's richest men, who has close ties to the Kremlin. Yesterday, a newly unsealed filing from Mueller revealed that Deripaska had loaned $10 million to a Manafort business. $10 million, which he presumably wanted back. So just to be absolutely clear, the guy who was running Donald Trump's campaign during the summer when he was running it for free and the Russians were sabotaging the election also just happened to be in debt $10 million to a Russian oligarch with close ties to Vladimir Putin at the very same time that Vladimir Putin and his government were working to get Trump elected president. Joining me now for the latest on the investigation, MSNBC contributor Natasha Bertrand, staff writer at The Atlantic covering national security and the Russia investigation, and Michael Isikoff, chief investigative correspondent at Yahoo News, co-author of Russian Roulette, the inside story of Putin's war on America and the election of Donald Trump. Michael, it was always unclear to me the made whole was ambiguous in two different directions, right? Do you want to get whole because the guy owes you money, or do you want to get whole because you owe him money? This seems to resolve that fairly definitively.
Yeah, there were multiple financial ties between Manafort and Deripaska. This new information about the $10 million loan comes on top of other reporting, which goes back to that I did during the 2016 campaign about how Manafort had gotten into a dispute with Deripaska over a $19 million cable deal in Ukraine. Deripaska thought Manafort had ripped him off. The money that he had put up for the venture had gone missing. But what's really significant here and why this is so important to the larger Mueller investigation is you said that Deripaska has close ties to the Kremlin. We should flesh that out a little bit. Deripaska was described in WikiLeaks cables written by a U.S. ambassador a few years ago as one of the 2 or 3 oligarchs closest to Putin. In Russian Roulette, we report how when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, in her meetings with Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he would repeatedly bring up the question of Deripaska because Deripaska couldn't get a U.S. visa because the FBI had concerns about his ties to organized crime. The concerns that the FBI had have been more recently fleshed out when Deripaska just a couple of months ago was sanctioned by the Treasury Department, in which they described the intelligence they had on Deripaska, his involvement in extortion, racketeering, bribery, the murder of a businessman in a dispute, and these organized crime ties. So here you had a oligarch with these organized crime ties who is so tied in with the Kremlin that the Russian foreign minister is pressing the U.S. Secretary of State to give him a visa, and the campaign chairman for the Trump campaign was in hock to this guy who's pressing him for the money that that he owes him. And then Manafort's response is, we'll give him private briefings about what's going on inside the Trump campaign.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy, he's waking up every day owing this guy $10 million, which seems like just thinking about it puts a knot in my stomach. And he gets on the campaign, the first thing he's like, how can I use this position? It's like the Blagojevich thing. I've got this, and it's effing golden, right? I've got this thing, which is I'm campaign manager for Donald Trump. How do I use it? Another person in the inner Trump orbit, Natasha, who seems to really be in a tough spot is Roger Stone. We know that he has not been contacted by Mueller directly for an interview. And then today, an ex-aide, another one, former aide to Roger Stone, subpoenaed to appear before the grand jury hearing evidence of the Russian investigation and to hand over documents. What is your sense of where Stone is in terms of Mueller's sights?
Well, it seems like everyone has been interviewed by Mueller except for Roger Stone, and that should be extremely worrisome to Roger Stone because it shows that he's kind of trying to get to the people closest to him in order to figure out what Roger Stone knew about what happened during the election before they actually get to maybe subpoenaing Roger Stone himself. I think that Roger Stone is really the key to possibly the key to understanding who was behind the Podesta hack and whether or not the campaign coordinated it in any way with WikiLeaks. The same goes for, if you have that key, then the same goes potentially for who knew in the campaign about the DNC hack. I mean, it's all kind of the same actors who hacked Podesta's email, the Russians, and who hacked the DNC. So if you have Roger Stone and if you have the answer as to whether he was communicating with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks throughout the campaign, then perhaps you have a clue as to whether or not there was an intermediary who was feeding WikiLeaks this stolen information that the Russians stole from the DNC and stole from John Podesta and then gave to the campaign.
Michael, do you anticipate we're going to get a trial of Manafort unless something changes? I mean, do you anticipate you've been reporting this very heavily for a while now, like learning new things in that trial? It's going to be quite a spectacle, I imagine.
Oh, sure. And look, it is quite common for prosecutors to hold some of their best stuff back. And one can expect, if this trial does come in July, when it's scheduled for, that we're going to be learning a whole lot more about just how much they know about Manafort and these ties. But also, you know, there is so much that could well be coming to a head this summer. The wide expectation here is that Mueller is likely to do something in the next couple of months. He can't wait until after Labor Day. He can't do something during the election unless he be criticized for doing the same thing Jim Comey did during the 2016 campaign. So we may well be coming to a very critical juncture, and it's, you know, ironic or, you know, pretty significant that this is coming at the same time that there's going to be those Supreme Court hearings about that next Supreme Court justice.
Natasha, does that scan with what your reporting indicates as well?
I have not heard that the collusion aspect of this investigation is going to wrap up by the fall. It's possible that there's going to be a major indictment, perhaps, that related to collusion that does come out before the midterms, and in that way we have kind of a conclusion to the collusion part of the investigation, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to wrap up. But there's just so much that we still don't know. We still don't know, for example, why 3 different people approached the Trump campaign before the summer of 2016, offering them dirt on Hillary Clinton, offering Hillary Clinton emails. We don't really know anything about this shadowy professor, Joseph Mifsud. We don't know anything about Henry Greenberg, the Russian who approached Michael Caputo. We don't know, for example, what Carter Page was doing in Moscow, whether he did make a deal with Rosneft. So these are all things that Manafort or that Mueller is looking into now, and whether or not we actually get an answer to all of those questions in the next 4 months, it just does not seem plausible.
Natasha Bertrand and Michael Isikoff, thanks to you both. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.